the one, the only, Ben Sion.
Good evening and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, just Daf It. Today we're doing Daf It Sotah, Daf Mem Hey, number 45. Great share for you tonight. Motzei Shabbos here. We're finishing hopefully Masechah Sotah this week. Sorry, Masechah's Gittin. Interesting Masechah, Yeshivish Masechah. A lot of people in yeshivas learn it. Some people consider it to be a very lumdish Masechah. A lot of good Iyun. And what better way to learn Masechah Gittin with the champion of Ian, Ben Sion, laying Ian with Ben Sion to accompany every daf. Masechah Gittin 8 minute, around 8 minutes, not it's 5 minutes, not 9 minutes, between 5 to 10 minute Ian share every day. It's worthwhile. Let's start at the top of Meheman Aleph. Second line, Elamata. V'yatzu shnayim, u'madu shnayim. Rabbi Yehuda harekan tish, Rabbi Shimon harekan shiva. We said yesterday, as a machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. How many of the dayanim, the judges from Sanhedrin, we'll see, it doesn't have to be Sanhedrin Gadol, it can even be Sanhedrin of 23 judges, have to go. Either 3 judges, according to Rabbi Shimon, or 5, according to Rabbi Yehuda. But they darshan, because it says Shof Techa and Zkenecha, so Rabbi Yehuda says that Zakanim, the lowest possible amount of Zakanim, plural, is 2. The lowest possible Shoftim is 2. And here there's 2 other psukim. There's the Yatsu, which also should be 2. And Madadu with 2 also, so it should be 8. And you can't have a based in Shakal, should be 9. And according to Rabbi Shimon, doesn't learn Shoftecha, but he should still have 7. Homi Bayla, the Gemara says, Homi Bayla to the Tanya, V'yatsu. These psukim are teaching me something else. V'yatsu teaches me hein v'lo shluchein, that the judges have to go to measure and not, they can't send an emissary to measure. Umadadu shafil himself all the year hayumodin shemitzvah lasag medida. Even if it was very clear, you're supposed to measure to which city it's closer. If it's very clear, obvious to anyone that it's closer to one city, nonetheless, it's still a mitzvah to do medida. That's the reason it's umadadu. This is not like the opinion of Rezav and Yaakov. The Sanya Rezav and Yaakov Omer is Zekinecha, Zu Sanhedrin. Shoftecha is the Melech v'Kohen Gadol. Shoftecha tells me that besides the judges, also the king and the Kohen Gadol have to be part of the measuring. Melech Tichsiv, Melech Mishpat Yamid Aretz. Right? We know that by Melech, it says the word Shofet. Pasuk says Melech Mishpat Yamid Aretz, a king through his judgment will keep a land stable. Kohen Gadol Tichsiv Ubasa Lakonim Levim El Shofet. The pasuk says in Parshas Kisavo, you come to the Kohanim and the Levim. They're considered the judges in your time. So Shoftecha is a reference to Kohanim also, the Kohen Gadol. It's talking about the greatest person is the Kohen Gadol in your generation. The Gemara has a question. He argues that you need also Melech and Gadol besides Sanhedrin. But when it comes to judges, he can either hold like Rav Shimon or Rav Yehuda, 3 judges or 5 judges. Or Dilma Sanhedrin Nami Pali. Adika Kula Sanhedrin. According to Lezer and Yaakov, not only do you need the Melech and Gadol, but you need the entire Sanhedrin. Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef tries to bring a proof. Tashma Matzan Zakin Mamre Bepagi Vehimra Alaya Yachal Te Hamra So Hamra. Now, there's a halacha about a Zakin Mamre. Zakin Mamre is basically someone who goes to the Sanhedrin Gadol in Yerushalayim, 71 judges. He asks an important question, something which has the weight of kares, and he gets a psak. And then he goes back to his own town, and he gives the psak against what the Sanhedrin said. He rebels. A Mamre, he rebels against the Sanhedrin. What happens if he finds the Sanhedrin sat on Harabayas, near the base of Hamid, Lishas HaGazis? What happens if you find them in Yerushalayim, in the walls of Yerushalayim, but not in the base of Hamikdash? And then they give a psak over there. And then he goes back to his own town and violates. You might think he's a Zakin Mamre. Zakin Mamre is punished by death. You might think he's a Zakin Mamre. Talmud Lomar, you have to go up to the Makom. Gorim, the place where they sit. That has to be the place where they issue the ruling. Sanhedrin Gadol. So what is the case talking about? How many of the Sanhedrin actually left? He found them in the walls of Yerushalayim, around the walls of Yerushalayim. Elaim with the Nafak Miksason. Rafil says some of them left. Dilmahanach the Ikagabai Kavas Israel. You can't say part of them left, because why would we even think he's a Zakin Mamre? It could be the Sanhedrin that's sitting in Lishkas Agazis near the base of Mikdash agree with him. So it can't be Hamra. That you don't need to exclude that case. Ela Pshita the Nafakul must be talking about a case where all Sanhedrin left Lishkas Agazis. Lamai. What are they leaving for? If they just, for their own discretionary reason, want to leave, mi matu nafki, could they leave? You're not allowed to leave. Aksiv, sarei chagana saral yachzar hamaze. This is a pasuk in Shir Hashir, I believe. Sarei, talking about your navel, but it's a reference to Sanhedrin where they said al yachzar hamaze. Mazeg is the mixer. When you have a drink, wine is usually mixed with water in a 1-to-2 ratio. So you have to have at least 1/3 the wine with the water. 1/3 is the wine. Nitzrach echad mehem lates and yesham esro shloshin keneged sanhedrin kana yotze v'mlav ena yotze. Approximately, you need 1/3 to remain in the lishkas hagazis. They can leave, but you have to at least 23 judges. 23 judges anywhere else are enough to judge capital cases. 23 judges is almost 1/3. It would be 69. There's 71 judges. 23 is enough. It's approximately 1/3. So they can't all leave. Ella Pshita Lagar mitzvah must be they left. There's a good reason they left. For a mitzvah, Lamai. What mitzvah they talk? Lavim Didas Egla Rufa. Isn't it coming to they all left to go measure Egla Rufa? Elazar ben Yaakov. Whose opinion is that? You need all the Sanhedrin. Must be Elazar ben Yaakov who says you need the whole Sanhedrin. So that Elazar ben Yaakov would disagree on Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda. Amar Le Abaye Lo. Dilma Lahosif Al Yerva Azaros. Maybe they left for a different reason. Disnan, we learn in Masechah Sanhedrin. If you want to add on to the city limits of Yerushalayim, or you want to add on to the Azaros, the Ezra's Nashim, or the Azar in the base of Mikdash, you needed all Sanhedrin to leave their place and to go measure over there. So it's possible that for those reasons, for that mitzvah, not because like Rabbi Yaakov, they left to measure Egla Rufa. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yosef. However, we found a brisa like Rabbi Yosef. Matana base Pagi v'him Ra'aleh can go and Shiatzulam Didas Egla Ola Sif al Irba Azaros. Right? He found this entire Sanhedrin near the walls of Yerushalayim. Why were they there? Why did they leave? It says explicitly they went to go measure Egla Rufa, or to host Sif al Irba Azaros, to add on to the Yerushalayim or the Azaros. You might think that his rebelling against the Sanhedrin would be constitute rebellion. So you see explicitly from this, right? They have to be in their Sanhedrin. See from this brisa explicitly that some opinion holds they all went. Well, the whole Sanhedrin is needed to go for Egla Rufa. It must be the opinion of Elazar ben Yaakov. The Mishnah says if you find the corpse, he's buried among the rubble, or he's hanging from a tree. The halach of Egla Rufa does not apply. Lema Masis and Rabbi Yehuda. Below Rabban, say our mission is like Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabban. The Tanya of Shachach the Omer Basada. This is halach about shikha. One of the manos aniyim is shikha. When you harvest your field, if you forget some of the sheaves, so you have to leave it for the aniyim. Shach the Omer Basada. Prat l'taman. Divi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says it says basada in the field, so it comes to exclude if it's covered. It has to be open like the field, like it's revealed. The Chamom and the Chacham argue basada. The Rabbo says a Talmud. The word basada actually comes to include something that's covered up. So you see, right? Rabbi Yehuda says sada is probably Talmud. It says sada by Egla Rufa also. It's an Arav, but Amarav Afilo Rabbanan. The Rabbanan could also agree with our mission over here. However, it's two different scenarios. The Psukim are talking about two different things. One's halach of shikha, one's halach of Egla Rufa. It says when Egla Rufa, when you find the corpse, right? Where do you find a corpse? Presumably it's lying on the ground. So therefore, when it says ba'adama, you say masada, it's ba'adama, it comes to exclude something that's covered over. Over there, it's different. It says the word shikha next to the harvest. Ma katzir b'galoi. Just like when you harvest, it's right. When you harvest grain, it's readily discernible. It's not covered. Af shikha b'galoi. So shikha is only things which are exposed. Kazan Rahman of B'sadel the Rabbo says a Talmud. So therefore, the simple explanation of the pasuk is that it has to be uncovered. Why did it say Batsada? So therefore, the extra word, it comes to include something that's covered over. It is also a part of Shicha. So Rabbi Yehuda Nami typically Mishicha Dumi at the Katsir. Why did Rabbi Yehuda have to learn that by Shicha it comes to exclude something which is buried? Right? He should also learn it from the fact that the word Shicha is next to Katsir. It's like Katsir has to be exposed. So Shicha has to be exposed. Therefore, if it's covered, it's not included in the mitzvah of Shicha. In Achanami, the word is really that's really what he does. Ve'ela b'sada lami. So what do you know with the word sada? Shichas kama. Right? We only know a shicha when you already harvested and then some of the grain falls. What about if while you're harvesting you forget to cut some of it? And that's why sadcha comes to include that's also part of the mitzvah of shicha. Rabbanon shichas kama min alhu. Presumably they agree with this that it's also included in the mitzvah of shicha. Where do they know that from? Nafklhu miki tiksar ksircha b'sadcha. It writes the word sadcha next to katzir, right? So it's like the katzir, even if it's harvested, is in the field, meaning it wasn't yet harvested. It's still in the field, and it wasn't harvested yet. It would still be included in shechah. Rabbi Yehuda, what does he do with the fact that katzir is next to the word sada? Right? If you cut down your harvest and the wind took it and blew it into your friend's field, right? That's excluded. And that's why it says that's your katzir next to sad. Sadcha, it has to be your field. If it's someone else's field, then it's excluded from mitzvah of shechah. B'rabbanan, the Rabbanan, where do they know that if the grain goes to someone else's field? It says the word sadcha, your field, right? Because it just says sadcha to tell you that someone else's field is not included in the mitzvah of shechah, even if it comes from your field. Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda, he didn't consider the drasha, the extra chaf, to be important, and that's why he didn't learn from that. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the following question: Safu omrin l'toch sadehu mahu. Let's say you have shechah in your field, and it blows onto a rock. It's not exactly lying on the ground anymore. It blows onto a rock. It blows onto a bench. It's elevated from the ground. Is that including Mr. Shechah or not? The airspace of your sada is like in your field. Olav kasada dami. Maybe it's not. Amalei Rav Kahana, the Rav Papi. Amalei Rav Kahana, Rav Zvid. Some say Rav Kahana said the Rav Zvid. Tivsha leimi de Rabbi Abba Amar Lazar. Let's learn the halacha from the teaching of Rabbi Abba Amar Lazar. The Amar Pralish Safu Amutel said the Chaver. We learn if the grain in your field blows away to your friend's field, right? You're not chayiv. It's not chayiv in shechah. The chaveroi and l'sel sadeh lo. And presumably, when it blows away, it blows onto a rock. Let's say in your friend's field. That's why safu. It's floating. The word safu means it's floating. It's not on the ground. So only when your friend's field is floating, that is not chayiv in shechah. But if it's floating in your field, it would be chayiv in shechah. A little tamayach, there are questions back. Is that really true? That only if it's on a rock or on a bench in your friend's field, then it's excluded from shechah, but if it's on the ground, it's not excluded. It says sadcha, your field. You don't have it. Of course, that's excluded also. Right? When it comes to exclude that blew into your friend's field, even if it's on the ground, it's excluded from shechah. Why does the language of Chazal use safu that's floating? The only way it's going to get to your friend's field is if it blows away. Not that it floated away onto your friend's field. Not that it's floating in your friend's field. So Tashma, the Gemara hasn't resolved the question yet. What about if it's on something else in your own field? You took a bunch of grain, you started to carry it, and you wanted to bring it to the city, either to sell it or something like that. You put it on another pile of grain, and you forgot both of them. The bottom pile of grain, the bottom sheaf, is considered shechah, and the top is not considered shechah. They said both of them are not considered shechah. What's the reason? The tachton, like we said before, Rabbi Yehuda holds, it's covered. If it's covered, it's not shikha. Like elyon, the issue with saf, and elyon is because it's floating. It's not lying directly on the ground. So you see clearly. Akan lo pligi ela b'tach. The only focus is by the bottom one, whether it's shikha. But elyon dibra kol lo heavy shikha. Everyone is not shikha. Presumably, like the reason that's said in the Bryce, if it's saf, it's not lying on the ground. To see if it's not lying on the ground, it's not shikha. The Gemara says, "Shiny Hassam came when the Islik Bay Zachabe." And the Gemara says, no, the reason that the top one is excluded is because it's different over there. He already grabbed onto it and he moved it to take it to the city. Then he forgot it. So once you're Masik Ba, you already kone it for yourself, and there's no longer be Shekha. So why, if that's the Chiddush of this Brisa to teach me of this Mishnah, Mesechus, I don't know which Mesechus this is. This Brisa is to teach me that once he grabbed onto it, that's why it's not shikha. Why does he talk about a case where one is lying on top of another one? I feel a b'sadar nami, even if it's lying by itself. Enachanami, the Gemara says it's true. I think Tani al gabi chaveru mishum tachton. The chiddush was to teach you about the bottom one. The bottom one is a machlokas, right? Which is the machlokas basically before, like we said, Yehuda and the Rabbanan, whether Talmud is exempt. The Gemara says, you can't say that's the reason because he grabbed onto it. It says because it's floating, because it's not on the ground. So when it says tzaf, it's floating. It's not. It's like it was floating, right? Meaning like if it floats, so your friend's field is exempt. So here also it's exempt because like it floated to your friend's field, because just like over there, it's not yours. Here, it is yours. That's the point. Once you're hiksik bo, once you grab it and move with it, so you're kona it, so it's like saf, which is excluded. Here also excluded, but not because it's on top. Amar Abaye, so the Gemara doesn't answer the question. Amar Abaye, hareini keben azai, b'shukei threi. Abaye says, he was, at one point, he was very confident in his knowledge. He said, I'm like Ben Azai, in the marketplace of Tiberia. Apparently Ben Azai was very confident, he knew all the answers. In the middle of the marketplace, everyone come and ask me a question. So sometimes Abaye felt like this also. Amar le ahumer Rabbanan. So one of the Rabbanim challenged him, Abaye. Shnei chalalam zal gabei. Abaye, let's go back to Eglah Rufa. You have two corpses, one lying on top of the other one. Mehechan hu modid. Which one are treated as Eglah Rufa? Min b'mino heavy talmud. You have two corpses on top. So min b'mino, there's one thing is covering the other one, but it's the same thing. Min b'mino heavy talmud is considered to be like underneath rubble. Min b'mino lo heavy tzaf. And we hold also the min b'mino lo havi, that's not considered floating. Ume'elyon modid, therefore it's not floating. The reason if it's floating, just like it's floating on the water, the Mishnah says it's exempt. So therefore the Gemara assumes that if it's not on the ground, it's also exempt from the mitzvah eglah rufa. Ume'elyon modid, therefore he measures from the top one, because it's not considered floating, because min b'mino, it's really on the ground. It's just on top of another dead body, but that's okay. It's like it's on the ground. Dilma, maybe the way we hold is min b'mino heavy saf. Maybe it's considered to be not on the ground. It'll be exempt. Min b'mino lo heavy talmud. However, min b'mino lo heavy talmud, it's not considered under rubble. When we talked on one, and therefore the bottom one would necessitate the mitzvah eglah rufa. You have to measure which one is closer and bring the eglah rufa. Dilma, third possibility, min b'mino heavy talmud. Right, two corpses, the same thing, it's the same idea. It's considered talmud. It's excluded. Min b'mino heavy saf, and it's saf, and it. And neither one is chayiv and eglah rufa. Amalei. So Abaye answered them, Tanisu, at the top of the Nehemiah Viz. It's a long daf today. Omer shehichzik bo, the same brayse that we had before. Omer shehichzik bo la'olicho le'ir. You took onto the pile of grain. You wanted to bring it to the city. You picked it up. You put it. You rested for a second. You put it on another pile of grain. The shikha, you forgot both of them. Hatachton shikha, the bottom was shikha, but elyon shikha, the top one is not shikha. Rishim when Yehuda Omer, Mishum B'Shimon, Shnei Amin shikha. Hatachton neshu talmud, but elyon neshu tzaf. Neither is included in the mitzvah of shikha. The bottom one is covered. The top one is saf, like we said earlier. Saf means it's on top, it's floating, it's not on the ground, or the other, the explanation the Gemara gave is because once he was hichzik bo, he took it, he was koned, and therefore there's no mitzvah of shikha. It's like kitzav. Savrua, the Hani Tnai Rabbi Yehuda sphere, this machlokas, both of them hold like Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar B'Sotah Prat L'Talmud. By shikha, he says if it's covered, there's no mitzvah of shikha. My lab b'hakam ifli. So what are they arguing about? The Marsh Savar Min B'Mino heavy Talmud. Right? These things min b'mino. It's the same pile, two piles of exact same grain. One opinion holds min b'mino heavy talmud, right? Omar Savar Lo Havi Taman. Right? Reb Shimon, the Tanakama says the bottom one is considered shikha. So he says min b'mino is not considered Talmud. It's not considered, and therefore you're chayiv in shikha. And the second opinion, Rabbi Shimon, min b'mino is Talmud. It's considered buried, and therefore, like Rabbi Yehuda says, it's exempt from shikha. Lo, ikar Rabbi Yehuda severe le the chuli al min b'mino heavy Talmud. So if both of them held like Rabbi Yehuda, everyone would agree, right? The same thing is considered buried, and therefore it would be exempt from shikha. They're arguing about the machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan have by shikha. Is Tamun included in the mitzvah of shikha or excluded in the mitzvah of shikha? Mithli the Rabbanan and Karabanan. The Rabbanan here who say that it's included in the mitzvah of shikha, al Karabanan. It's buried, but you're still in chayim in shikha. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda. Shimon Yehuda holds like Rabbi Yehuda that it's excluded. Why does it say a case where you put one pile of grain on another pile? I feel about offer with straw nami. If that's the machlokas, the highlight of the machlokas, whether you hold like Rabbi Yehuda or the Rabbanan, whether Talmud is considered included in the mitzvah of shikha or not, why is it a case where it's min v'mino, even in a case where it's covered over with dirt or with rocks? In a chanami, it's true. The reason it says this case, the teacher of the chid strength of Rabbi Yehuda, Damar, afilu min b'mino heavy Talmud. Even if it's min b'mino, right, it's still considered buried, and therefore it's excluded. Of course, it's buried if it's buried with rocks or dirt. It's considered Talmud and excluded. Tanar Rabbanan, Chalal, it says Chalal by Egla Rufa, a corpse, v'lo chanuk. Chalal usually means that it's beheaded with a sword. Chalal cherev. That's what usually Chalal means. The Arabs, their meat is considered halal. They don't do the shechita like Jews, but halal in the word in Islam means permitted. That's what halal means. So it's permitted if they do some sort of shechita, they cut off the head. Usually halal is from the neck, you decapitate it. But if it's choked where the neck is not cut off, so then it's not included. If the person found between the two cities is just strangulated, there's no mitzvah of egla rufa. Chalal lo mefarfer. It also says chalal, a corpse, that he's dead, lo mefarfer. Not that he's writhing in pain, that he's almost dead. He has to be completely dead. Ba'adama, it says ba'adama, in the ground. Not that it is covered over with rubble. Begal, lo tam begal. No fell below tali balin. He's fallen, and not that he's hanging on a tree. Besada below safal panei amayim is in the field, and is not floating on the water. Relezer almer bekulan imhaya chalal orphan. He says in all these cases, there's no exclusions. In all these cases, whether it's floating on the water, whether it's covered, whether it's hanging on a tree, you do bring an egla rufa. Tanya, Amr Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Amr Lo Lezer. They said to Lezer, Yeta Modeh Shemaya Chana Kumuta Ba'ashma Shena Orphan. If he was strangulated and thrown in the garbage dump, there would be no egla rufa. That presumably everyone agrees to. Alma Chalal V'lo Chanuk. So obviously you agree that the word Chalal has significance. The head has to be decapitated and not Chanuk. Not that he's strangulated. Hakanami ba'adama below Talmud. You're going to darshan that. Why do you also darshan the word ba'adama below Talmud? Right? It can't be covered over. Bagal below Talmud bagal. No fell below Talmud b'ilan. It's fallen and not that it's hanging from a tree. Besada below safa gabe mayim. Also besada in the field. Not that it's floating on the water. Why do you include those things also? The more answers for Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer chalal yisei raksiv. Rezer doesn't darshan those things. The reason he darshans chalal is because it says the word chalal twice. Why does it say the word chalal twice? To teach you that someone who's strangulated is excluded. The other ones are not excluded. Nimsa samach l'sapar l'yer sharuba of the kochav. The Mishnah, the previous Mishnah says that there's no egla rufa if the body is found between a city and the border of Eretz Yisrael, or it's found between two cities that are mostly non-Jewish cities. What's the reason? The sivki matzah, pratla matzah. It has to be something which you find, which is not likely, something which happens all the time, right? Non-Jewish people murder each other a lot of times. Not all non-Jewish people, but a lot of times idolaters commit murder more than it happens a lot, quite frequently. Or next to the border of Israel, where it's a neighboring country which is not Jewish, that's more frequent. There's no mitzvah egla rufa. Oliyir shem ba beistin. What's the reason? The reason, if it's next to two cities that don't have a beistin, you need ziknei, or you need the judges, at least from the 23 judges to go. You don't have that. Ein modin el ear. So the Mishnah continues. The Mishnah finishes off. You only measure to the city where there's a beis din. So pshita. It's obvious. The last clause in the Mishnah is obvious. Came on the tana ear she'en ba beis din. Since the previous line said you have to, right? If it's next to a city, there's no beis din. Ani yadar dein modin el ear she'esh ba beis din. Obviously, the only place you're going to measure is the city that has a base din of 23. Hakamashman Kedetanya Minayin Shinimsa Samach Leir Shein Ba Base Din Shmanikon also Umodin Leir Sheish Ba Base Din. Tamalomar Vlaku Zigna Ir Hahi Mikol Maku. It says the word Ha'ir. Why does it say the word Ha'ir? To tell you Zigna Ha'ir. In any city where there's Canaan, if there's found between two cities, one does not have a basin of 23, and one does have a basin of 23. To which city do you measure it? It doesn't matter if it's closer, even if it's closer to the other city, it's closer to the city without the basin. Since the closest city with a basin, it's between those two cities, you measure to that city, you bring it, you do Egla Rufa in that city, even though it's not the closest. Nonetheless, it's Zikna Agir, wherever the Canaan are, that's where you do Egla Rufa. Mishnah says, Nimsa Mechuvon Ben Shtei Ayaros. You find somehow it's impossible to measure. You measure and you find a dead person. He's exactly in the middle between two cities. Shtei and Mevia Shtei Agal. Elazar says it's possible that each city has to bring an Agla Rufa. Yerushalayim Mevia Agla Rufa. Another halacha, Yerushalayim does not bring an Agla Rufa. The Gemara will explain why. Nimsa Rosha Makom Echad V'Gufa Makom Acher. Let's say a person is decapitated between two cities. His head is in one place and his body is in another place. Elazar says you bring the rosh to the goof, you go with the goof, the body. You bring the body to the head. We'll see in the Gemara what they're arguing about. From where do you measure? Let's say the body is intact, right? Where do you measure? Which part of the body do you start measuring? He says you measure from the navel. You measure from his nose. He has a third opinion, you measure from his neck. Because chala usually is when it's decapitated, is you measure from the neck, the place where you come to chala. Where it says, my time with the lezer. What's the reason of lezer? Then he says you bring two eglat ruvos if it's in the middle. Tanakama argues at him. Kasavar efshal it sounds. He holds it's possible to be exact, to be precise. To my focus in the Gemara. Do we rely on calculators? We rely on exact, being precise. We rely on ways and things like that, on artificial intelligence. The krova, filu krovos. Even though it says krova, seemingly only you bring eglat ruva to one city. Krova is not exclusionary, it could even be two cities. Yerushalayim does not bring Egla Rufa. Damakra, L'rishta. Pasuk, when it's talking about Egla Rufa, says L'rishta, to inherit. Because Yerushalayim was not distributed to any of the Shvatim. It's jointly owned by everyone. It's Machlokas elsewhere. He holds like that. The Mishnah holds like that. Nimsa Rosh Makom. So Machlokas, let's say the head is found in a different place in the body. If a Michael Mifli, what's Machlokas? They're arguing from where you measure. You measure from the head or from the body, or to find different places. The next line in the Mishnah says from where they measure. And they have the same machlokas, right? Yakiva says you measure from the nose. He says you measure from the navel, which is part of the body. So there's that machlokas. So what's the first machlokas about? They're arguing about something which is not related to Egla Rufa. They're talking about a mace mitzvah, a person who dies and he has no person to bury him. He dies in the middle of the road, so even if he dies in someone's property, he gets to be buried in that place. It's a mace mitzvah. He's supposed to be buried. Covered on mace entitles him to be buried in that person, even though you own that property. He's buried there. He can be buried there. So they're arguing about an aspect of that. The kovro kana makomo. Right? To bury him, he acquires place. That's only where his body's intact. Let's say his head is in one place and his body's in a different place. Where is he kona his makom? Right? His head is in one person's field, his body's in a different person's field. Where is he kona makomo? So in that case, Releza says you go where his body is and you bury him there. You go where his head is, you bury him there. Others are hold that when a person dies, his body falls in its place. Reisha, the idea of a nafel, the head tends to move, so the head rolls somewhere else. And Akiva holds that really the head stays where it's placed when it falls. The body has a tendency to move. With the argument we'll talk about in Iyad Ben Sion, it's a very interesting machlokas about what has more primacy on a person, his head or his body. It's a very fundamental machlokas. There's two machlokas about the same exact thing. We'll talk about that in Iyad Ben Sion. From where would they measure? Rabbi Kiva holds the life of a person depends on his nose, comes from his nose. That's Rabbi Brisa. Marsavar Iker Chiyuse Mitibure. Rabbi Ezra holds the main life of sustaining force of a person is from his belly. Leimaki Hani Tanai say the machlokas of Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Ezra is like the following machlokas. Mehechan Havlad Notzar. There's a machlokes in the brisa. Where is a child created from? Or is it really formed, right, as a fetus in utero? Where does he start? Where is the creation of the fetus from? A rosho. The Tanakhama says he starts being created from his head. From the womb of my mother. Atagozi, Vomer Gazi Nizri Veheshlichi. The word Gazi, we see from the pasuk Gozi, Gazi, throw your hair Veheshlichi. Nizri is their hair, so it's obviously the Gozi is a reference to your head. Abashal says no, that originally the beginning of the formation of a fetus is from the navel. He grows in both directions, the feet down and the head on the top. I feel the tema Abashal. Mar says no. Abashal could agree over it. Atkan lo kamar Abashal in the sira. The chimitzra of the amsiyase mitzvah. He reasons that when a fetus is formed in the middle. That makes more logical sense to him. He would agree, presumably like everyone, to Rabbi Akiva, that the main life force of a person is in his face. Right? The Ruach Chaim, the lively force, is in his nose, his face. He has a third opinion. He says you measure from his neck. My time does him in Yaakov. The pasuk says in, I believe it's in Yechezkel. This pasuk says. This pasuk is in. Where is this pasuk? In Yechezkel. The pasuk talks about halal. The word halal used by Egla Rufa, and it says savar. Savar is used next to the word halal, so therefore halal is generally determined from the neck, and that's where you measure from. That's the conclusion of today's share. Stay tuned for Ina Ben Sion when I talk about this fundamental malchus in Rakiva and Blazer. What is the death of a person? Is it cardiac death or brain death? Is a person who's brain dead, is he dead? We'll talk about that. Ina Ben Sion coming up.